Copyright in these lectures is either owned by the ANU or a third party who has licensed the ANU to use it. Students may use the recording for personal study only. No lecture may be communicated online, copied or shared without the prior permission of the ANU.
Computer. You have internet? Yes. Fine. Yeah, it's alright. And you want to record it for Yes, perfect. That one. That'll last. That's off. Yep, perfect. And then is it going to record? Oh, water, I can choose. Not here. Extra. It's working. It needs my. Perfect. You will. You're good to go. Have you?
Sorry for the delay, and I have to carry my mask with me to move on to the next lecture. As you can see, we have all the plastic chairs and nowhere for you to write down, make notes. And it's unbelievable, but we have to live with it. I would rather they put me back to Llewellyn Hall with all of the lights on my face. I can bear with that, but not these things. Luckily, a lot of you have received my message to come to the first lecture, and I really appreciate that. And let's see if this lecture is going to be recorded and how we go next week. So many of you have known me. My name is Hua. I'm going to teach portfolio construction for this semester. Very importantly, I would like to put you in a better position when you go to find a job in finance. So not anything like I get a high distinction in the exam or get a high distinction in the assignment, but I want you to be a better person to find a job in the industry, no matter it's an analyst, portfolio management, financial planning, wealth management, or just banking, corporate banking. So with that in mind, I got my own approach or expectations of your activities, learning, and my teaching experience in this course, which might be different from other courses or from other lecturers who are teaching this course. Just make sure I have the correct lecture slide. So the first lecture of this course is extremely important so that you understand the expectations from me to help you to achieve that goal at the end of this semester. And I'm going to spend 1 hour to explain this. If you think it's too boring, please just sit until the end of the hour so that you are going to gain much better from your experience in this course. In the second hour, I'm going to talk about, in general, portfolio management and its industry, but not really asset allocation. That's what we are going to do over this semester in this course. So what we do in this course is called portfolio construction, which is very precise. We don't do funds management, and we don't do security selection. So if you are expecting to learn to become a portfolio manager, no. If you are expecting to learn to become an analyst or a banker, you're not going to learn much. But we try to give you the chance to gain the skills to become an analyst or portfolio manager in the future or working in the financial service industry. So basically, we do portfolio construction. It means that we have a certain amount of money. We try to assign this amount of money into different buckets of asset classes. So we do, ultimately, quantitatively, we're going to produce asset weights in this course. Given the investors' objectives, investment horizons, and all the other very individual circumstances. That's what we do over this semester, and we have applied focus, which means that you're not going to learn any new formulas, or you're not going to learn any new theories, and you have done that already in the first 2 years of study in your Bachelor of Finance degree, for instance. What we do is that, okay, here's the foundation of what we have done in the first 2 years of uni, doing a finance degree, and this up there, that's what we need to solve in the real world. Construct a portfolio for a client, no matter it's an individual client or institutional investor, for instance, a pension fund. So we'll try to fill in the gap of applying the fundamental classic finance theories in solving the real-world problem. So our approach throughout the semester, in every single lecture, is to introduce the challenge and then help you to understand the challenge and provide the tools, solutions to mitigate the problem or try to solve some of the problems to some extent. There's no perfect solution for any single problem. So that's why I say the objective of this course is to prepare you better in a better position at the end of the semester to become an analyst or portfolio manager or a strategist in the future. Along the way, we're going to have assignments, which is 30% of the overall course grade. And I do have high expectations on students, especially on assignment. That's the most practical component of this course. In almost every lecture, when we talk about these issues, challenges, and the solutions, tools, I try to relate all of the available tools or solutions to the actual problems in your assignment. So along the way, you are guided to solve the real-world problem, like what we have in the assignment. The jobs where these kind of knowledge or skills will be helpful in the future will be portfolio management industry. It's especially with the institutional investors like superannuation funds, mutual funds. If you do have some understanding of Australian population, you probably know that we have an aging population, which is a challenge faced by most of the developed world. And with that aging population, on the macro level, a lot of retirees, they are downsizing. They sell their houses, especially in the Sydney market. If you do own 1,000 square meter land with a 5-bedroom house, you probably can cash in about $2 to $3 million. So with these employees, the baby boomers, starting from a few years ago, they started entering retirement. So it's very likely they're going to put this actual cash into superannuation accounts. And if they don't, they need other investment vehicles to generate income for their own retirement living, or they want to leave something for their grandchildren. So that's part of the estate planning. So the growth area of wealth management is not just a phenomenon in Australia, but in all the other Asian emerging markets as well. So what you learn from this course can be directly used in wealth management jobs. Of course, in this course, you don't learn to be a financial planner in classroom. We just provide the opportunities for you to learn, to gain some skills and technical tools. You have to sit in the office and talk to your clients to learn to be a financial planner. And other jobs will be like the analyst, junior analyst positions in investment management for hedge funds, private equities, or other mutual funds, even the index funds. Now they'll have the smart beta products. That's something in between the actively managed funds and the index funds. We're going to come to talk more details on this later. There's one thing I would like to remind you that if you have been following the financial market in Australia, you should understand that last year there was very extensive media coverage of Banking Royal Commission, the hearings, the criticism on Australian banks, not just banks, all of the financial service providers. If you have no idea about this, do a Google search, especially read articles from Australian Financial Review to get a better idea of what's going on in the finance industry. So I talked to some my friends and colleagues in the industry. They have this impression that there will be substantial structural changes in finance industry. The traditional banks are closing their branches. A lot of business has been moved online, or by other means of services. And also there's a rising demand of, even on a junior level, of people who are specialized in risk management and assurance services. So usually the first half of the year, I would like to invite a few people from industry to talk about these career potentials of finance students. But this year, I think I made the right decision. I didn't invite anyone. You see, we have our own difficulty of doing lectures. I don't really want to ruin the day of my guests. So I do get the insights from people in the industry that because of the tottering of the Banking Royal Commission, there's a very high demand of risk management people in the industry, and assurance service, compliance service as well. So if when you go to look for a job in the industry, just don't limit to investment banking. It's only a very small part of the market that you can let yourself on a nice job with a career future. So these are the some useful aspects. My experience, I was actually an equity analyst. So if you have done 355, the corporate valuation, that was exactly what I did before becoming an academic. So I read thousands of company reports, media disclosures, and tried to work out the valuation of a company. For a very short period of time, about 6 months, I was involved in equity portfolio management. But I decided that was not something for me, and later on, I decided to become an academic. So I do have my own perspectives in terms of what you might learn in uni and the challenges in the industry, especially in Australia. So if you would like to have a chat about your career options, or you have some ideas or anything like that you're not sure, you're welcome to talk to me. I'll do my best to help you. This course is combined. We have both undergraduate students and postgraduate students. The teaching will be the same. Tutorials will be separate. Because of the background and experience differences, you're better in different streams of tutorials, so that the discussion will be more effective. And the exam will be different, but the same assignment will be assigned to all students, in undergraduate students and postgraduate students. I don't think I have time to talk about the asset allocation trends anymore. That's a diagram to show you that the change of asset allocation, the changes in the past several decades. This is from a supplementary reading from week 1. That's an older version, but it tells the same story as the newest version on water for this year. So basically, we see the rise of the alternative investment across all of the pension funds around the world. So that's what we mean asset allocation. So traditionally, 30 years ago, any institutional investor like pension funds portfolio was dominated with the equity and fixed income, and that's it. But right now, we have a much more diversified portfolio in terms of asset classes. We're going to talk about more of the changes and the impact for these funds later on. So that's asset allocation. That's the pension funds, the endowment funds of universities. They still tells this similar story, the rise of the alternative assets. They are the infrastructure investment, like the airport. Recently, the federal government is starting a hydro project, electricity project in Snowy Mountain. So the idea is to pump water up the hill and let the water go to generate more electricity for the eastern coast area. I don't think that makes sense for me, but anyway, it's that they're going to put billions of dollars into that project. That's one of the alternative investment for portfolio managers to consider. And the problem of that, most of the alternative assets are illiquid, like the hydroelectricity project or the second airport being built in Sydney. All of these are illiquid. If you want to offload, there's no market for it. And sometimes you have to stick with it. That's the other side of the story of alternative assets. So over this semester, we're going to come to discussion of these kind of issues in terms of asset allocation. So given the objective investment horizon or liquidity need, for instance, of this investor, we're going to try to figure out a so-called optimal asset allocation so that there's a higher chance that investors' objectives can be achieved and all the other requirements and liquidity can be satisfied as well. So the illiquidity of some of the alternative assets will be considered, and the alternative assets, of course, offer a much wider range of investment opportunities as well. So we're going to examine these trade-offs in almost every single topic over this semester. That's what we do in this course. Not just give you an Excel model or fancy computer model to generate asset weights. It needs our judgment. The final decision of asset allocation is never an output from a quantitative model. It's the decision of human beings. The approach, like I have emphasized, we try to fill in the gap between the classic finite theory and the problems, challenges we have in solving a real-world problems. So you're going to have a lot of readings to try to understand these issues and try to understand the tools, the solutions available, and how these tools can mitigate these problems or help us in overcoming these challenges. So the emphasis is the understanding of concepts, not mathematics, not Excel models, not fancy VB projects in Excel. So focus on the reading, understanding the key concepts, at the same time, keep up with the quantitative side of the course. It's not a mathematics high intense course at all. We have minimum amount of calculation. You will see later on at the end of the lecture, I'll give you a few questions that will be most likely in the mid-semester exam and final exam. This is not a course that you're going to do a lot of calculations. It's all about understanding the concepts and apply these concepts in solving problems, understanding the challenges, and trying to figure out a solution to solve these problems. Another important difference of this course is that the lecture slides are relatively thin compared with like corporate finance course. I know in some courses you have maybe up to 100 slides for a lecture. That's where you're going to get your formulas, the calculations, and everything that's going to be in the slides. Reading the slides will help you a lot to pass the exam. That's not the case for this course. On average, we have 20 slides for each lecture, 2-hour lecture, and well, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking, explaining the concepts, and try to get you through the understanding of the issues and the challenges, and try to let you understand why we have this tool here and how this tool can help us to mitigate or overcome this challenge. So you will find only 20 slides for each lecture. Obviously, reading the slides is not a very effective way of understanding concepts. So I would like to encourage all of you to come to lecture. And before the lecture, it's best you can do all of the readings. Or just scan through the readings quickly. You get some ideas what we're going to discuss over the lecture. And that will help a lot, especially in the first half of the semester. And if you don't understand what I'm going to talk in the second hour or in the second, third week, don't give up so early to drop the course. It takes like even the top quarter students, about 4 to 5 weeks to settle into the approach of this course and into the materials, the concepts, the way that we approach solving a real-world problem. The tutorials are extremely important. I use that word too much. The tutorials, if you had the chance to look at the tutorial, they are already up there, and almost every tutorial we have Excel-based models. So on one side, they provide a framework for your future development. For instance, you get a junior job as an analyst for UniSuper, for instance. And when they give you some task, like analyzing the housing market in Australia, you have some understanding. You have some starting point to start your modeling. So that's one side, the function of the Excel models. The other side, or more important function of the tutorial exercises, is try to help you to understand the concepts we discuss in lectures. So in other words, the challenges and difficulties in applying finance theories in the real world. So the interpretation of the quantitative outcome is much more important than copying the Excel formulas itself. On Wattle, you're going to find a demonstration of video, the Excel models for each tutorial. So basically, you probably will learn all of the Excels, the formulas, functions, how you might play with Excel from the demonstration of video. They're already there. But the important part for you as a student is to understand the ideas behind the numbers. When I give you a standard deviation of Australian equity market, it changes over the years. And having a number is not end of the exercise. You probably want to understand why it changed from 20% in the 80s, gradually decreasing to 18%, 16%, 14%, even sometimes for a period of time, 10%. Why? So in tutorials, I have asked the tutor to focus on the discussion of the tutorial questions instead of demonstrating all of the Excel functions or formulas, these kind of things. Of course, if you have time, you are free to ask any questions related to Excel to your tutor. Basically, I would like you to finish, try to attempt to solve the Excel, the tutorial questions before your tutorial. Just sitting there without understanding of the context does not help you with your study. The assignment, I'm still writing the assignment right now, so it's going to be released probably in week 4. It's going to be a very well-defined client case. And the client is going to ask you to provide portfolio construction advice, this asset allocation, given their own circumstances. We're going to talk about this in week 4 workshop in more details. The assignment, these are quite straightforward about the after lecture quizzes. I was told that the interactive question and answer platform of Echo 360 is not working as well, so we'll try that later. If you have your smartphone, tablet, or computer, laptop with you, you might try to answer the questions. We'll have the results up there straight away. Just after most of the lectures, I'm going to have a few very straightforward questions, just test you how much you get from this lecture. This will replace some quizzes in tutorials, because from my experience, doing quizzes in a 400 student class, not very effective, and the questions will be passed around. The grade will not be a fair evaluation of your understanding. So I'm going to run this quiz after almost every lecture. It doesn't count towards any course grade, or you are not graded anyway. It's not going to be entered into the grade book. But at least for me, I like to find out, okay, how much my student get from that lecture. And you might use this a test of your own understanding, or after lecture, or before the semester exam, you can use these quiz questions as preparation for the exam. So they are going to be always available with the recording. So when you go to Watto, click Echo 360 ALP, and with each lecture recording, you'll find the presentation icon. Just click in, you will find all of these questions. The assignment. Because this semester, I don't know what's happening, they gave me 5 tutors. So we can have a smaller group, 3 to 4 students. If you believe 2 of you or as an individual group to do the assignment, it will be more effective, let me know. It's possible with 5 tutors. So the group selection links are already on Watto. I would like you to talk to people you know or talk to people who have similar objectives from this course to work together to try to choose a group for yourself. By the weekend of week 4, if you are not in any group, I'm going to randomly allocate you into a group within your course cohort. The tutorials, the link between the tutorials and the assignments. I believe a lot of you have some understanding of the assignments of this course. There will be a lot of play with Excels. I try to write a new case every semester so that you don't simply just copy from the assignments circulating around. How you're going to get the skills of playing with Excels from the tutorial exercises. So especially week 2 until week 5 or 6, with the first several tutorial exercises, you're going to get most of the skills you need to solve the problems with the assignments, like calculation of returns, try to incorporate the investor's circumstances, constraints into the optimization process, and return adjustment and other aspects of the quantitative part of the assignment. So follow the schedule of the lecture and tutorial, especially in the first half of the semester. It's important to build the foundation for you to be successful in the assignment. Okay, so I'll skip this. To get help, if you have any questions with your assignment, group problems, or anything that you have issues or questions about the lecture, the readings, come to talk to me. I have consultations on 2 days over the week, just in case you have lectures or tutorials or other commitment on 1 day. But with anything related to tutorial exercises, go to see one of the tutors, not just your tutor, any tutor. So I think all of the tutors have consultation in the afternoon. I have consultation in the morning. So go to see them to ask questions about the tutorial, the interpretation, anything related to Excel. I try not to answer questions about tutorial. Is that, okay, I'm reviewing all of the tutorials, updating right now at the beginning of the semester, and I'm going to forget about it very quickly. My brain is very selective of what things to remember, so it's really take a lot of time for me in week 10 and try to remember something that I did 10 weeks ago. So for tutorial related questions, talk to any of the tutors. Most of them are very experienced. Even I think Jack didn't do tutoring last semester, but he was in my corporate valuation class last year, and he was in student management funds. He's very good. So you are really in very good hands of getting help from the tutors. You don't try to ask questions about the assignment to your tutors. They're not going to answer. So come to see me if you have any questions about the assignments, like what does this mean, and what kind of things I want to include in the assignments in my analysis. Come to talk to me. Before the assignment is due, there will be additional consultations. I'll figure out a way that most people can see me to get help, but I'm not sure with over 100 groups, how can I organize this? I'll figure out later. The expectations for your participation in lectures, tutorials. We're in a better theatre, although you're sitting in plastic chairs, but it's much better than Llewellyn Hall that I couldn't see any faces at all, and I couldn't hear anything from the students at all. So when you have questions, stop me straight away and you can ask questions. In the lecture, that's fine. I do understand you probably will feel unsafe in such large space, or ask questions in front of a lot of other people to feel that you are silly. I can answer any questions during the break, and after lecture, just come to talk to me. I promise I'll turn off the mic to give you the privacy. The readings, that's another difficult point of this course, and it's very different from a textbook. We don't have a textbook, and we don't follow that recommended textbook. If you're interested, you're extremely interested, passionate, becoming a portfolio manager, you can buy that textbook. It's a very good handbook for a practitioner. But if you are unsure or you're not very keen to spend that almost $100, it's okay. So most of our concepts we're going to cover in this course are from free sources, like the journal articles or free publications from some of the investment managers. So some of them are free documents, like from the CFA Institute. So reading these can be very overwhelming. When I first taught this course, and that was a huge task for me as well. So the strategy, an appropriate strategy for the reading is very important. You have to allocate your time and efforts wisely, focus on the concepts we cover, discuss in lecture, and then go to the readings, find the related sections, and focus on these sections. If you don't understand some background information, come to talk to me or read the entire article. That will give you the full picture. That's for the supplementary readings. For the examinable readings, you probably want to read a few times to understand better of the whole story. But I want to give you some relief that there will be no fine details examined in the exam or in the assignment. For instance, the percentage of water asset allocation from any superannuation fund, or the growth rate of funds management industry in the UK market or in the world. No such facts will be tested in the exam in this course because that's too easy. You can copy that from your cheat sheet. In the exam, you're going to have cheat sheet and you can put anything you like in there. So what you're going to be tested in the exam will be understanding, not the copying the facts or bullet points. I want to clarify this because in the past several years, I always read the students' feedback from the survey that they think, okay, we didn't learn anything useful. I will ask myself, how come they have these comments of not learning anything useful from this course? Probably because at the start of the lecture of the semester, we didn't really set the expectations right. So we do develop a framework of asset allocation that may guide you in future career as a wealth management specialist. So it's a framework, not really a guidelines of what you can do with this or what you can do with that, or these are the things that a checklist. No, this is not going to be like that. We develop a framework as a guideline only. So for instance, if you do become a financial planner or paraplanner after you finish your uni study, and you're given a job to understand the client's objectives in the first meeting. So where do you start? You don't just go there and talk to your clients about the weather, their children, their divorce, for instance. But there's a framework or starting point for you to start to understand the status of their financial assets, the status of their superannuation, and also the liabilities, the human capital of your client, and their other important life issues, like if they have, sometimes that's usually the case, they have recent divorce, they probably will need some changes with their estate and will as well. So these are the things that you want to start thinking about when you become a paraplanner. So that's the use of this course. We provide a framework or starting point. Or for instance, when you become analyst for private equity funds, and you are going to invest in agricultural products in Australia, for instance, with almond farming, for instance. So where do you start? Where do you start? There's no historical data. Almond farming, you can't find any historical data. Not like the Australian equity market. You have the historical returns, you can generate time series, calculate standard deviation, and try to understand what's happened with this market. But with agricultural farming or almond, very particular projects, almond farming investment, how can you assess this investment? And in this course, that's what we kick in to provide you guidance of thinking the framework. You probably want to consider the profitability of the investment, at the same time the illiquidity issues and regulatory related issues. So that's what we do in this course. Build understanding of issues in applying classic finance theories in practice. So we have this context of portfolio construction problem, but the skills or understanding you develop in this course can be easily applied to other areas in finance. For instance, corporate finance, merger acquisitions, investment banking, or even equity analysts, these kind of jobs. So for identified issues, we propose some solutions and tools. And we just propose these might be the tools or solutions available to mitigate or solve some of the problems. So eventually, you are the person to make judgment, make decision, to choose the technical tool, figure out the best solution for you to solve the problem. That's what we do in this course, to give you this experience to make decisions, make judgments, so that in the future, when you do have this real-world problem, you have a starting point. On the right, we have the things that we don't do. We don't do in-depth study of any particular asset class. I find this point is particularly difficult for students to understand. The thing is that starting from week 6 until week 10, every single lecture can be extended into one course. So we do discuss these asset classes, but we try to focus on the characteristics of these asset classes and their link to investors' objectives. So if the investor's objectives is to generate annualized return of 3.5% above long-term inflation, and given the other constraints, and why do you want to allocate 60% into equity instead of 20%? So we're going to solve these kind of issues and discuss the options and the trade-off particularly. So we don't really do very detailed study of managing an equity portfolio, no. And we don't deal with any valuation or security selection problem as well. So you're not going to expect to learn that, okay, how can I make a lot of money from investing in Australian equity market or investing in Asian emerging capital markets? No, that's not going to be something you learn from this course. So we have a very clear emphasis of investors' objectives, and for each lecture we're going to do in this course. And we do not try to manage the portfolio. There will be minimum coverage of portfolio performance evaluation, like the manager's performance evaluation, but we discuss these topics from the aspects of constructing the portfolio. And we do not run the fancy quantitative models of security selection as well. This is something that I got. I usually got these comments from almost every semester, the students' feedback. So I try to put you on the same boat as me, and we have this same objective there, not trying to make a lot of money or trying not to learn to be a portfolio manager, but I want you to understand that I try to put you in a better position in the future when you go to find a job in the industry, and I try to put you in a better position to become an analyst, junior analyst, in no matter what areas of the finance industry. These are the suggestions. I have covered some of these topics. You may reconsider your commitment to this course. Usually, in course outline, it says at least 10 hours. It's far from satisfactory. If you have an objective of achieving distinction, high distinction, or really gain a lot from this course, 20 hours at least per week is minimum. So there will be a lot of readings, and again. For a lot of the students, reading once is not enough at all. So that's hopefully I give you some better understanding of the course and my approach in terms of teaching or our expected learning outcomes. Are there any questions you would like to raise? Anything? Yes? Every week, every single week. We are very lucky to have 5 tutors now. Yeah. Anything else you would like to raise, or that's fine if you don't want to ask. You can come to see me after the break. So we're going to take 5 minutes break, and then in the second hour, we're going to talk about the actually portfolio management. Get you some brief general ideas of the industry and who are going to be involved. Thank you very much. Hopefully it's captured by the system. In the second hour, we're going to talk about portfolio management in very general terms, not really going too deep about something technical or complicated to scare you away. So I really want as many finance students to sit until week 5 or 6 before you decide to drop this course or not. So portfolio management. If you simply believe, okay, portfolio management is just to generate high return, maximize wealth, that's not the case. So I'll give you an example. Now, a lot of Australians are transitioning to retirement because of especially the baby boomer generation. So they come to talk to you like a 70-year-old couple with $3 million of cash. They just sold their house in the western suburb of Sydney, and they are not sure how to deal with this pile of cash. So that's what we try to solve in this course, to give you a framework to solve these problems. So is it going to be generating a high return for your client? Is it like maximizing the wealth? Like after a few years, for instance, 5 or 10 years, they're going to have 5 million or 10 million of assets? What's going to be the objective? Where are you going to start? So all of the problems in portfolio management or asset allocation actually starts from understanding the clients' or investors' objectives, investment horizons, and all the other individual circumstances. So for the retired couple, they would like to have enough income from their assets of $3 million for their retirement living. That's what they want. And they also want to leave some money for their grandchildren to support their private school fees, and that's another objective. And they probably want to set up a family trust because they believe that's not going to be their own lifestyle would not need so much money, and they want to leave some for the future generations. So these might be the objectives of why your clients came to visit you. So any portfolio construction or portfolio management starts from understanding the investor's objectives. That's actually the essence of all of the discussions in this semester, no matter it's understanding the role of equities or growth assets in a diversified portfolio, or towards the end of this semester, we're going to discuss the tax issues or other transaction cost issues. All of the issues in portfolio construction are going to be related to the investor's objectives. Because when you get paid for your service, you're actually paid to improve the chance that your investor, your clients, are going to achieve their objectives. You're not paid to maximize their wealth. So the very individual circumstances come into multiple dimensions. The requirement of returns, expected returns, if it's an absolute number, like 5% per annum in long term, or 2% over the long-term inflation, or 2% above the average performance of the similar funds in the market, or sometimes the objectives can be the liquidity need, how much money they need, or how much living expense they need to extract from this pool of assets to support a certain level of lifestyle in their retirement. So objectives is not single dimension, it's multiple dimension, and these multiple dimensions, they can interact with each other. For instance, with investors of high net worth, of multiple $1 million of investable cash, they're probably more adventurous than a retired couple of $20,000 of assets. So it really depends on the investor's circumstances. So the portfolio managers will take on the role to understand the investors' objectives, their circumstances, the complete story of their circumstances, and try to assign the asset weights so that the investor has a better chance to achieve their objectives, subject to the constraints of illiquidity, leverage, for instance, and sometimes investors do have certain preference of not investing in some companies, in some assets, for instance, coal mining, tobacco companies. All of these are the responsibilities of the portfolio manager. You look after the need, the objectives of your clients so that they have a better chance to achieve their objectives. The portfolio management function, that's a rough industry structure of where you're going to find the portfolio management function. I don't have the pointer. So on the top, you're going to have the individual investors or members of pension funds. For me, I'm a member of UniSuper, and these are the beneficiaries and investors and some individual investors. They receive benefits from the investment portfolio. And the wholesale, the aggregators, they are more like a platform. At UniSuper, there are probably dozens of portfolio managers. I put my money into the fund. It's going to be assigned to one portfolio manager or multiple portfolio managers, given my desire, my preferred mix of assets. In there, we have superannuation fund, insurance companies. Insurance companies, they collect insurance premium and make investment. They do have certain reserve, like banks, so that they can pay the compensation, the claims from insurance policy holders. But with the rest of the money they collect from the insurance policy holders, they make investment. They're going to keep the investment returns after paying for the expected claims. Endowments and foundations are the endowment funds at large universities, for instance. The most famous endowment fund in the world is Harvard. Before the global financial crisis, the portfolio manager, you can do a Google search, it was a lady. She made headlines quite often because of the exceptional performance of the endowment funds. You know why? Have you had any idea of why? Alternative investment, private equities, infrastructures. But during the global financial crisis, the Harvard Endowment Fund was hurt badly because of the illiquidity problem of the alternative assets. And afterwards, they could not offload these alternative assets. We understand there was a steady recovery of the equity market. They missed that opportunities as well. So sovereign wealth funds that arise in the funds management industry, especially after 2000. So a few countries in the world established their own wealth, the sovereign wealth funds. They are not investing for return. They probably want to gain some leverage in the political negotiation or on the international stage for their own country. And also they invest to support some of their own pension system. So with these superannuation funds, that's probably the most important component in the funds management industry in Australia. We have corporate super funds. These are the funds set up by corporations like Telstra. They have the resources to hire portfolio managers or asset consultants or analysts. They have their own team to manage the superannuation funds for their own employees. Retail, for instance, any one of you can become a member of retail superannuation fund. Industry super fund, like UniSuper. So with industry super funds, they have the feature of low fees. And they sort of try to provide value for money funds management for their members. And they are not for profit. But the industry super funds has been just recently, after the recent New Year, industry super funds has been questioned, scrutinized about their effectiveness in helping their members. As you understand, whenever there's no sufficient supervision, no sufficient monitoring, there will be lazy portfolio managers charging a flat fee but not doing their job. So industry super are being examined now. Public sector, that's the superannuation funds for the public servants. It used to be dominated with defined benefits funds. So when you become a public servant, you got this like entitlement of receiving this amount of retirement or benefits when you retire. Now they are shifting the model to defined contribution. So we do pay you the super guarantee or additional superannuation contribution, but we're not going to guarantee a certain amount of benefits. So what you're going to receive when you retire depends on the investment return on your account. Lastly, something very special for Australian investors, the self-managed superannuation funds. So industry belief is that you have at least $200,000 to establish the self-managed superannuation fund to be viable and cost-effective. Because as a separate superannuation account, you're going to manage your own superannuation with the money in the account. You have to follow some compliance or reporting regulations that will be sometimes costly for individual investors. So with self-managed superannuation funds, now the regulation has changed 2007, 2012, especially 2012. Now they can borrow money to buy real estate. There has been some substantial changes in that area, and there might be some consulting work needed in the industry for these a small group of investors. Most of Australians are still with either a retail, corporate, or industry super fund. That's what we find at the top. The individual investors, they either go with one of the options on the left listed here. So that's not actually the funds management. The aggregators like UniSuper is like a platform. They have the professionals here and working for the members. The actual asset allocation or portfolio management happens with the investment managers. So for instance, I invest in high growth. I'm with defined contribution UniSuper, that's the division. Defined contribution fund, I invest 100% of my super in the high growth fund. So they have a group of managers managing that fund. It's not going to be in one hand. With that, that's the investment managers, where the portfolio management functions resides in the industry. So my money, my super money is deposited into my super account. It's going to pass on to investment managers, the portfolio managers of high growth. It's a blended product. With that, investment managers, not just UniSuper, other like Colonial First State, the portfolio managers with Colonial First State, or with Telstra Superannuation Fund, they have their own access to particular assets, for instance. As an individual investor or self-managed superannuation fund, there's very limited resource for me to invest in a startup company or invest in a new IPO in the market. But with the investment managers, they have their own relations with the investment banks or with asset consultants. They are aware of the new investment opportunities. They may get me into that. For instance, the startup IT companies that's going to be listed in the ASX market. So through the portfolio managers, you probably will have a better access to assets. As an individual investor, the availability of assets is very limited. On the right-hand side, we have the financial planners. It's actually a very controversial thing in the industry. If you have been following financial market, especially ASIC or Reserve Bank of Australia, and you do a Google search of financial planning or financial planner, and with the keywords of ASICs and RBA, you probably will find the report that study was done a few years ago, that over 70% of the changes recommended by financial planners are not necessary. They just want to generate sales revenue and receive the commissions. The financial planning industry has started the reform that changing the fee from commissions to fee for service, starting from 2012. They had several years to adopt the new model of fees. When I taught, I can't remember the course I taught at UNSW quite a few years ago. It was a postgraduate course, and there were like maybe only 15 students. So we had a lot of time to have conversations and discussions in a very small class. Out of surprise, out of the 15 students, 3 of them were paraplanners or financial planners. That was in 2011. So I asked them, why? Because I knew that to become a financial planner, you don't even need a finance degree. You don't need a bachelor degree. You just passed a few courses at TAFE or passed a few exams that you have the compliance certificate. You could become financial planners. They told me that the industry was quite nervous about the outlook of the industry because of the reform of the fee structure in financial planning industry. They started worrying about losing their clients, and they could not charge the commissions, not even upfront and trailing commissions as well. So in the past several years, I didn't pay too much attention on financial planning industry or talk to any financial planners, but I do believe there's still a lot of work to be done in that financial planning industry. And recently, if you have been following the Banking Royal Commission, they didn't just check the mortgage or lending or whatsoever services they provided. There was an investigation of the financial planning services they provided to clients as well. You may want to search and read several articles on that. The practice was generally not ethical, not professional, not competent at all. But they are very important avenue for a lot of investors who are not very complicated or sophisticated in terms of finance or investment. They ask advice from financial planners, like some of my friends. They go to the financial planner and ask their advice, tax planning sometimes, and ask their advice on other matters. So that's one important avenue for a lot of individual investors to have access to assets or have their portfolio construction advice. That's the general structure of industry. What you can find is that there are so many people, entities, standing in between the investor and the assets, or actually how much money they're going to put into one particular asset class, say equity, alternative assets, or government bond. All of the people in between, the aggregators, portfolio managers, investment banks, and financial planners, they all can have some say in the asset allocation decision for the investors. Now here comes the problem. When you delegate this decision to someone else, there will be some problem. What do we call it? Agency problem, yes. That's the source of the agency problem in the funds management industry, and it's not a trivial problem at all. For instance, the portfolio managers of UniSuper, the funds I invest in, they have very good personal relations with some of the brokers, like CommSec. It's often mentioned by the media for not very good reasons. So we have very good personal relations, and okay, it's towards the end of the quarter, and my mate just gave me a call that, look, I've still got some, like a performance target to achieve. Can you do me a favor? Okay, as a portfolio manager of UniSuper, I do have discretion over the millions of dollars funds within my control. I can direct the sales or buy orders to my mate. And instead of affecting my own performance, I'll buy the same securities at the beginning of the month and sell them at the end of the month. So at the end of the quarter, where my performance is going to be evaluated, I still have this amount of assets. And at the same time, the asset allocation is still like this within the band that's given by the board of directors. Okay. And at the same time, I did a favor to my mates, and they have the buy and sell orders. They charge commission, and they have bid-ask spread. They can take a cut from these transactions. So that's one example of the possible agency problem in funds management industry. Of course, with the financial planners, there are even more evident, obvious agency problems. They recommend you to buy like Australian equity fund from Colonial First instead of from MLC, for instance, or from EMP. They just try to push you into the products that pays the highest commission. That's one example of the agency problem between the investors and financial planners. Even with the aggregators, the superannuation funds, like industry funds, if you have time after class, have a look at the board members of UniSuper and ask yourself, okay, I'm a member of UniSuper. How much these people look after my interest? You will see representatives from higher education institutions, some academics or professional staff like me, 1 or 2 members, and some high-profile members from the industry who are really expert in funds management, and other members of the board for the UniSuper will be like the higher ranking level personnel from the universities, for instance. Do they really care my benefits? Do they really care my prospect of after retirement? I doubt it. Usually the board will meet a few times over the year. So how can they monitor the investment managers or portfolio managers of UniSuper? How much monitoring they can impose on these people? So that's another layer of the agency problem. As a member of UniSuper, I delegate some of the management decisions to the board members of UniSuper. I'm not quite sure they are competent or they would like to look after my interest. With the investment banks, whenever they are involved, people will try to criticize them. There are Chinese war between different departments of investment banks that it's inevitable that information will be flowing between their departments. Like if they are hired, for instance, as an asset consultant to provide investment advice for some of the institutional investors, for instance, Telstra Superannuation Fund, some of the people from investment banks. Well, at the same time, they're evaluating several infrastructure projects in Australia, the hydroelectricity, the second Sydney airport, and the almond farming, for instance, and they're going to recommend one alternative asset to Telstra Superannuation Fund. Well, at the same time, they got phone calls from the other departments of the same bank, like ask them to do them a favor to promote the investment projects because they are the consultants for that project. For instance, the Sydney airport. They work as the advisor, try to find finance for that Sydney airport projects, and they ask the investment bank, the asset consultants from the same bank to do them a favor to recommend this project to institutional investors. And that's another problem, another example of agency problem. So the asset consultants may not recommend an assets that will be of the best interest for their clients. Instead, they will recommend the Sydney Airport projects to their clients to do someone else a favor. In return, they will receive some benefits, monetary or not even monetary, or other favors in the future. So the funds management industry is filled with possibilities of agency problems. That's why the governance issues, the compliance system, the risk management system, mechanism in funds management, extremely important to protect the interest of members like me. Okay, there's another layer of the agency problem is the way that portfolios are constructed. For instance, with the sheer size of UniSuper, there's no way that you're going to engage one manager for all of the equities, because that will be probably several hundred millions of dollars. So you probably will have several portfolio managers just for the equity asset class. And some of these managers will be specialized in Australian equity, some of them will be European equity, some of them will be even Japanese equity, and some of them will be emerging market equity. So in practice, the portfolio is constructed in tiers, by different tiers of buckets. So that's going to create another layer of delegation, or in other words, agency problems. The asset management decision process, that just gives you some background information where the portfolio construction resides. So at the planning level, when we set up a new fund, you first need to establish the governance system to decide who is going to be responsible for what and how their performance is going to be evaluated, no matter they are portfolio managers, some investment staff, analysts, or even board members, how their performance are going to be evaluated and their specific responsibilities. They decide the objectives and constraints. For instance, we're going to set up a separate account to manage $5 million for a retired couple. We need to understand their objectives. Are they trying to maximize their wealth? Are they trying to just generate enough income for their retirement living? And what kind of retirement lifestyle they prefer? According to, that's very rough calculation by APRA, that's the government agency oversees superannuation industry, that for a couple, $40,000, about that will be enough to have a comfortable lifestyle. So are they targeting this kind of lifestyle, or they define comfort as something else? Or maybe they need $80,000 per year to have a comfortable lifestyle. So that's what we do when we understand the objectives and constraints. And some investors might have their own particular constraints, like I don't like short selling, I don't like taking leverage, I don't like investing in coal mining or in tobacco companies or in diamond mining companies. And then you decide usually you start from a band of asset allocation, a rough asset allocation. For instance, given the objectives and constraints of the investor, we decide a so-called balanced portfolio, 60% in growth assets and 40% in fixed income. That's a very simple example. And then the implementation, how I'm going to invest the 60% of funds of $5 million into equity. Do I choose 100% Australian equity or just 100% international equity? Or do I have higher exposure to emerging market equity or small cap companies? These are the implementations, portfolio structure, these issues you're going to consider. The execution of the asset allocation, that's going to be done through third party, usually. Review, you have to review the performance of your portfolio. If it's an actively managed portfolio, you're going to review the performance of the portfolio manager or related investment staff and monitor the execution, implementation process and report to the board of any problems and readjust, fine-tune the whole process. So that's the process of portfolio management. What we deal with in this course will focus on the third point of the plan level, asset allocation. So we don't really go to the portfolio management implementation or not very much of performance evaluation, but the asset allocation at plan level. And also we make the investment decision of the asset allocation at a static long-term target. We try not to deal with the dynamic nature of investors' objectives in the future or the dynamics of the investment opportunities. So given the current available information of the investor and the investment opportunities in the financial market, we make asset allocation decision. That's what we do in this course, asset allocation at plan level. I think that's a very quick introduction of the industry and who are going to be involved in the process and where what we do in this course is going to reside into the whole process. With the readings, especially in the first week, you have quite long supplementary readings. Focus on the trend. Read the tutorial questions first. You go to find the facts and then try to answer the question. If you have the time or if you're interested, you might go deeper of the reading. The primer is very easy reading to give you some impression or general ideas of portfolio management. If you have no idea of how financial market works. Okay, tutorial enrollment. It's very important you try to finalize your tutorial enrollment by week 3, I think. Otherwise, you have to go to talk to one of the staff at the admin office to enroll into a tutorial manually. I have no access to any of the admin system at all. So sending me an email to tell me your preferred tutorial is no use at all. You have to talk to someone at the school office and make sure you bring your student ID to prove you are yourself. That's the lecture for this week. Any questions or anything you want to clarify? I'm not done yet. Don't pack up. Any questions? This is going to be tricky without the facing the computer to talk. So probably just leave it there. As I said at the beginning of the lecture, I want you to put you in a better position to become an analyst or be better to apply for a job in the industry. So starting from the first lecture, the start of the semester, I want all of you to start reading the articles, even the websites from Reserve Bank of Australia. it's a very good source to get you understand how financial market and different segments of the economy are working together. So on the homepage, you'll find the monetary policy. Click in there, you're going to read this. The monetary policy of Australia, of Reserve Bank of Australia, and inflation target, interest rate decisions, and the minutes of their meeting, the monetary statement on monetary policy. So next week, they're going to hold a meeting, monetary policy meeting, and they're going to have a decision of the interest rate. In the industry right now, at least in the morning, I read several articles, the journalist reports that a lot of economists are expecting they're going to slash the interest rate again. But I don't think that's very likely. We'll see how it goes next week. So from there, you're going to understand the monetary policy of Reserve Bank of Australia. Why are we all following that? Do you understand why? I want to know. Raise your hand if you believe you understand why the financial market participants are following closely their monetary policy investment. That's one. Anyone else? Only one? Okay, that's fine. I did this survey quite a few years ago. Only 5% of the students in this course actually follow the financial market news regularly. So I want to improve that. Starting from this semester. So you got to read about the Reserve Bank of Australia, its function, its monetary policy, and read about the interest rate there, the inflation target. Why are we all following this? Like, for instance, if you're going to work for a corporation, a manufacturing company, for instance, you're going to decide to purchase a very expensive piece of equipment worth $100 million. Given the uncertainty in the financial market and the economic conditions in Australia, what's your decision? Inflation expectations, the interest rate movement, all of these measures, these are things that you're going to find on the homepage of Reserve Bank, are going to be important inputs into your decision. Or I can give you a closer example. If you have an apartment in Sydney, right in the middle of the city, for instance, it's worth $1 million. Although it may be shabby, but it's perfectly located and you have some needs, you are thinking, okay, it looks like the housing market, especially the department housing market, is not really performing well. Shall I sell it? Cash in $1 million, probably not $1 million anymore, or shall I hold on to that investment longer? Or shall I buy additional investments in Australia, in other parts of Australia to diversify that risk? All of these decisions will need input from Reserve Bank of Australia, of the inflation, the interest rate, their monetary policy. The monetary statement of monetary policy is actually an interpretation of Reserve Bank's understanding of the current development and the future prospect of the country, not just financial market. So decision makers in the economy, just you, any one of you, me, and anyone in the corporations, the purchasing managers will follow Reserve Bank of Australia closely. Or even for any investors, for instance, they are just focusing on the value of the investment, for instance. They hold 60% in Australian equity and 40% of Australian government bonds. And the interest rate movement and inflation expectation and expectations that they can extract from the statement of monetary policy will affect the financial market investors' behavior. Are they going to continue buying more Australian equity, or are they going to shift their asset allocation mix of their portfolio, or are they going to just hold cash? So these decisions that are very important, and all finance students should understand and follow regularly. Another source of information to help you to understand the financial market is Australian Financial Review. It focuses on Australian businesses, Australian companies, Australian economies. And they got several very good journalists writing very good analysis. So you may scan quickly the title, just find the article that you are interested. Spare like maybe 20 minutes every week to catch up the development of the financial market. With all of the accumulation, the build-up of vocabulary, build-up of understanding of the financial market, I promise at the end of the semester, you are in a better position to talk at an interview. You don't need to have your unique viewpoint or unique insights into the financial market to impress the panel, really, especially for a junior analyst job. So hopefully that will help you a lot. I'll do a survey at the end of the semester to see if the 5% that students who following the financial market regularly will increase to like 10 or 15%. That's one thing I would like to highlight. We still have another 10 minutes. If you have your phone with you, or tablet or laptop, next we're going to have a look at a few questions, like after lecture quiz. If you want to leave, you can go. That's fine. I'll open up from water. So that's our first lecture with the green dots. That's a presentation icon, and you click in, you can participate that quiz. It's the first time I use this, so I'm not quite sure how it works. Oh, someone has submitted the answer. Okay, so the question reads that this, in the diagram below, what are the areas where an agency issue may arise? So that's structure of the portfolio management industry. Looks different from my view. Can you choose, or do you have some blank area to answer the question? On the question, on there? Selections of A, B, C, D. Do you have that? Okay, good. Okay. Can you answer the question and click submit? There are a few questions following this one. You might proceed to the next question if you finish this one. You have another 1 minute to finish the questions so that we have 5 minutes to discuss the results. Okay, the first question, which of these trends have been observed in the fund management industry over the past 1 or 2 decades? I talked about some of these trends already in the lecture, and so the first one, high industry growth rates in excess of GDP. You will have some understanding of the actual numbers from the supplementary readings, but you are not required to remember this. You just need to understand the funds management industry is growing faster than GDP. So in Australia, or the average growth rate of all of the developed market is about 2-3%, but the growth rate of the funds management industry has been on average 5-6% in most of the developed market. Growth in the alternative assets, that's something I talked about. There's a surge of investment interest in the alternative assets from like 1% 30 years ago until recently. It's very stable at about 20% of the average portfolio, not just individual portfolio. Movement towards defined contribution pension funds relative to defined benefits. So that reflects a recent trend in the past 1 decade. Australian pension fund got the highest percentage of defined contribution funds. So the members will take the full responsibility of funding their own investment, of their own retirement, instead of receiving a certain amount of retirement benefits or pension. In some developed market countries like Netherlands, even US, Canada, and Japan, they got much higher proportion of pension assets in defined benefits, where the members are going to be entitled to a certain amount of retirement benefits. It's kind of very risky promise made by either the government or the corporations who set up the DB funds. D, shift from passive investment strategies to active investment strategies. Oh, there are 5 students chose this one. There actually has been a shift from active investment strategies to passive investment strategies, starting from the global financial crisis. We'll come towards more of these statistics when you read the supplementary readings. At least if you are following the financial market news, in recent years, you should read more about Vanguard, ETF, than any other active management strategies. Some of them have jumped the ship from the actively managed portfolios to Vanguard or the ETF funds, partially because of the high fees charged by the active managers. The last choice, high growth of self-managed superannuation fund relative to corporate and retail funds in Australia. That's true. There's a surge of self-managed super funds, although the total size might be very small, tiny relative to the total assets under management of corporate or retail super funds. but they are growing exponentially in the recent years because of the regulation changes. But that also imposes some potential risks for the livelihood of a lot of Australian people. The order of these asset allocation tasks, the first one will come the understanding the investor's objectives and circumstances. That will be the first one. That's the second one, transform investors' objectives and constraints into quantifiable and unquantifiable measures. That's where the quantitative analysis will kick in, will fit into the